All right, 24 hours after the first Patriots practice as a team in 2025, we are recording here in the Pass Interference Podcast, brought to you by the CLNS Media Network and our friends over at Prizepicks. Please subscribe to the Patriots Press Pass channel and my channel at _Andrew Callahan, which slowly, like drunk crawling home from the bar, nearing 1,000 subscribers after almost a year plus, thanks to no promotion on any kind of social media. It is Wednesday afternoon, May 21st, a day of celebration in the Callahan household because the breathless reporting over the tush push is over. Fellas, the ruling is tushes can still be pushed. So we push on with Taylor Kyles, the CLNS, with Mike Kadlick of Sports Illustrated, together forming the world famous Patriots Daily Podcast. Welcome back, fellas.
Thanks for having us back, man. World famous. That's something. I didn't know we hit that threshold.
Look, as soon as you get, I think you can check like 3 foreign countries, you can call it world famous, right? Like,
hell yeah. I like that standard.
this show reaches Ireland, I know, Netherlands, someone from Chile wrote in. I go, boom, that's 3. We're good. It's kind of still in the same hemisphere, or in the West, I should say, but we call it world famous.
I was going to say we should try to expand, but maybe that's not a thing someone from in New England should be talking about. A little on the nose.
When you get the podcasts statistics and you see, like you said, the Irelands, the Finlands, you're like, these people are actually listening to me in other countries talk about not just football but Patriots football. It does constitute being world famous at that point for sure.
Yeah, or I wonder how just my mom figured out how to change her IP so she knows it make me feel better. Like, oh, today I'll be from China as I listen to boost.
She saw one of the NordVPN ads.
Yes, precisely. All right, I don't know how many people are going to be listening and watching after the Patriots season ended yesterday. Drake Maye throws 4 interceptions at the OTA practice. I don't know how the Patriots will persevere. Let's set the scene, though, because I think this is important. And look, we could do the normal, it's May and non-pads. Like, the non-padded part matters, okay? It was an hour 45-minute practice. They went from stretching to positional drills. They worked on punting, a lot of 11-on-11 periods, and then finished with walkthroughs of 11-on-11s, which was more run game focus. But as Mike Vrabel said, this is a passing camp. That's what it should be labeled, not OTAs. This is a voluntary passing camp. That's really what it is. So no pads. We're not going to see those till the second week of training camp. And here are the guys who are absent. Stephon Diggs, Ramondre Stevenson, Sidney So, Joshua Farmer. Stevenson, all best wishes to him, sending strength as he grieves the loss of his father. Matt Collins and Vidarian Lowe were there, did not participate. Here were the limited names. Kyle Duggar, Jabril Peppers, Morgan Moses, Mike Onwenu, Jalen Polk, Jared Wilson, Jalen Roy, and Marte Mapu. Moses and Onwenu participated more than the rest, but everyone else who I did not list was there. To me, when I think about what was the most important thing from yesterday, and we're going to get to Drake Maye in 4 picks, it was the attendance. Like, this was abnormally high, even for a first-year coach, to have everyone there who could be there basically be there.
Yeah, and I think it was kind of nice. There were some spots where you could tell the fact that some guys weren't participating kind of bumped some dudes up, but also giving them a chance to participate more. Maybe we get, Efton Chisholm was one guy who got a lot more snaps. But yeah, at this point in the year, we know how devastating injuries have been to this team over the past couple seasons. So to at least start here is very nice. But, I'm not holding my breath because we have a long, long way to go. But this is obviously a very good start.
And you mentioned the voluntary aspect of it. Think about how easy it could be for a guy who, he's banged up. He's not going to practice. He's rehabbing from surgery. He, has something else going on at home, like to just not show up. And I know that that's easier said than done. It's still your profession. It's still your job. But the buy-in where, Matt Collins is out there in shoes as well, not barefoot even, walking around, getting his work done, probably inside, comes out outside and is kind of around the team, knows Josh McDaniels, etc. Like, that's important. And to have so many guys there, I mean, a guy like in Morgan Moses, who, we know he is a leader. He spoke very highly after practice too. That guy is like a quote machine, as we saw in his first press conference. For him to be there and work, and we'll get to everything else, how important he was to yesterday's practice. But, for those guys to be there, I think it's definitely a step up and, a positive in the right direction for this team.
Yeah. And look, the attendance will change practice to practice, right? Some guys, when they return tomorrow, Thursday, for their last OTA practice of the week, will just go, I want a long weekend. And if they're a little banged up, they can do that. It is voluntary. So this is not to applaud the team in the way that a lot of people are taking Drake Maye's 4 interceptions and be like, oh my God, this guy's falling. Okay. Because you can show up to class every day. And if you still fail every test, like, you're not getting a thumbs up on the way out. So there's a balance here. But if you're looking to see things that match up what you're hearing, right? Everyone's talking about buy-in since Vrabel got there. Well, what we saw matched up what we've been hearing. So that's been verified. The buy-in is there. Was there anything else that stuck out to you guys as particularly meaningful before we dive into the big headline of Drake Maye threw 4 interceptions?
I would maybe just kind of add on to that point because, like you said, the buy-in and the fact that it actually followed through is huge because, like Mike Vrabel give the Bill Belichickian, like, it's voluntary, voluntary, like emphasizing it in the way where you're like, this shit ain't voluntary. Like, you got to show up or it's going to be impactful. And not only do you have them there just to check the box, but the Morgan Moses quote really did drive it home where he's talking about the fact that this is a young position group and, where they're the Aaron Rodgers of the world who act like this part of the offseason doesn't matter and that you can be a quarterback who doesn't show up for the offseason program. You've got a veteran like Morgan Moses who, he's been in the league a long time. He's a guy who's been banged up. He has every reason not to be there if he doesn't want to, but not even just because he buys in, but that's also the team bringing in guys who have the character to value their spot as leaders and bring these guys along. So I think that's pretty huge. I love that both you guys brought that up.
And we'll get to, I'm sure, the nitty gritty of the offense. And I know we're going to talk about Josh McDaniels a little bit later on, but I thought Mike Vrabel's presence around the offense was meaningful and interesting because as a guy who has come up as a defensive coach, obviously he worked with Cleveland a little bit on the offensive side of the ball last year. He was really running things on the offensive half of the field where they kind of let the defense and Zach Kerr run itself, essentially, where we've seen over the last couple seasons, Bill Belichick, defensive head coach, Drake Maye, defensive head coach, Mike Vrabel, seemingly a defensive head coach, but he's really taking charge of the offense. And Josh McDaniels was, for lack of a better term, in a back seat and had his headset on and was calling the plays. But Vrabel was really there with like 5 sets of eyes, understanding what the quarterback was doing, what the offensive line was doing, what running backs, receivers, like he seems like the man in charge of the offense. And I want to see how that continues to evolve, but he really showed his presence on that side of the field. I thought that was intriguing.
It's a really good point by you, Mike, because, when you think about Josh's offense in a very basic, but big picture sense, it's so different from the Matt LaFleur, Arthur Smith offenses, that you saw in Tennessee with Mike. But what those offenses did in Tennessee were mirrored Mike's personality, how they wanted to play offense with him as the head coach. And when we heard from him before practice, he specifically used those words of what we want to do on offense. It's not what Josh wants to do. Okay. Right. It's what Mike Vrabel wants to see. And so I think that will reveal itself, maybe not formationally, maybe not from a play calling standpoint, or even like really dive into the, Mike doesn't want to run as many, post wheel combinations or option routes or whatever you want to define Josh McDaniels' offense. But the run pass split will be interesting because when we talk about the team being made in Mike Vrabel's image, it's not just the defense. It's not even just the special teams. I mean, it'll be an interesting dynamic to see that push and pull of is it Josh's show or Mike's show. Did you see anything like that, Taylor?
I think so, and it kind of reminded me of what it was with Belichick. Like, we had some conversations before Josh McDaniels was hired, even when he was, about can he handle it with his ego and everything? Like, we know what's happened as a head coach, and, there's been some issues there. But when he's been an offensive coordinator, it's been fine. He's told stories about how Bill would come into his office and be like, all right, we need to run the ball, 30 times a game. Or he'd give him these obscure kind of directions, and Josh is sitting there like, so do you want me to do this or do you not? So like he's used to kind of being the guy who, like Elliot Wolf, it's like, hey, Vrabel's going to tell you like what dinner he wants. You go get the groceries and you make it happen. So that seems like a role that Josh is perfect in because he doesn't have to be the guy that's commanding everything, which is where it seems like is where he kind of starts to kind of go off the rails in terms of being that great leader. But if it's Vrabel's vision and he can just be the guy where it's like, I'm going to use my knowledge to help implement that, I really like it. And it doesn't seem like there's any kind of, tension or anything. It just looks like a Vrabel run ship with a lot of guys that are happy to be doing their job so far.
Yeah, and even if there is tension, right? Like, this is football. Like, these are loud, proud guys. We even had Jared Wilson, who in his second interview ever as a New England Patriot, as a professional person in a workplace, asked about his boss and go, yeah, he's short and loud. Talking about Josh McDaniels. Like, We know this from the new players, from Josh being here, obviously, for 20 years. And that's okay. Brady went at it with McDaniels. It's just interesting because when you reference that, it does mirror Bill, who would go in and say, this is how we're going to play the game. This is what I want to do. Basically, here are the ingredients and work within these bounds, but make what you will. Like that's what Vrabel's done. And the only overlap, I think there are a couple overlaps when you think about him and Belichick and how they operate, because he's not on the Belichick tree. Like that's just, it's not a thing. He played here, but the way he will set the week and hand the coaches, this is how I want you to attack or plan or do whatever. This is my vision. Make it come to life is something that's going to come back here with Bill. Whereas Mayo seemed to be, Alex, whatever you want, man, you got it. So
head coach of the offense, baby. That's what his role was.
Yeah. All right, Drake Maye, 4 interceptions. Mike, let's start with you. What did those show you? We'll get into the plays and nitty-gritty, but like what if anything did those say?
Big picture that he's still learning, and it's however what probably single digit days actually fully practicing this offense. So like it doesn't bother me entirely. Obviously you'd rather it be a lot more crisp, and that was kind of what Vrabel said before practice was we want to get in and out of the huddle, we want to have good communication, etc. It looked like all that stuff was pretty tied up. It was just the fact that he was turning the football over, and like a lot of we'll get into it when we talk about McDaniel's offense a little bit, I'm sure, but like there seemed to be a lot more deep concepts than is sort of we've known what's known for in McDaniel's. It's more of a a dink and dunk. We want to get the ball in guys' hands, etc. He took some shots yesterday, and 2 of them were intercepted. And I hate to say that's okay, but sometimes you have to take your chances on a May 20th practice to see what your guys can do, where you can fit the ball in, etc. And I'm okay with taking those chances on May 20th. Now, the miscommunication, or what Pop Douglas didn't want to call a miscommunication underneath, that one bothers me a little bit more just because it's the same issues they dealt with last year. But I've said it once, I'll say it again. It's still only May, and so you want to hash those mistakes out now, look at it, try it, look at it on film and fix it. It's just clearly and obviously overblown because we were actually there in or outside of the building to report on the fact that he threw an interception that went for a pick 6 against Chris Gonzalez.
Taylor?
So I thought it was a mixed bag for the interceptions. And I know, like, I remember we put the video up and some people were like, all you have to say is 4 picks. That's it. Not really, because interceptions are like, there's the reason there's interceptions and turnover-worthy plays, right? Mm-hmm. There was the one where Christian Gonzalez just looked like a guy who was an all-pro last year. Seemed like he peeled off his assignment, then got back field and picked off a throw to Kyle Williams. Like, that's obviously hard to say. Maybe we look at the all-22 and Drake was leading him, but sometimes players make plays. You have the one where it gets deflected and then picked off. The egregious one that kind of took me back to college, Drake, was the floater over the middle that went right to Del Pettis, where you're like, I know where you think that was going, and it was not close. But this is the time of year to make those mistakes, right? The defense has a bunch of veterans. We know at this time of the year, it kind of takes a while before the offense has a real advantage, especially considering how young they are. So, yeah, if you think the option route's going to stop here and then it ends up there, yeah, if it happens in the summer and it keeps happening, yeah, we got a problem. But at this point, you're just hoping that that's there. Now, Josh McDaniels can take them into their rooms or the position coaches and say, you did this, you should have done this, or, you're fine, maybe a little bit tune-up. But this is all about tuning up right now. Now we see, is this something that continues? But, with Josh McDaniels, are hoping that kind of stuff gets nipped in the bud pretty quickly.
All right, I'm going to go down and run down every single pass that he threw in the notes that I had on these, and then zoom out and talk about 3 big picture things. And Mike, you can take those wherever you want them. Couple of layups to start. It's Kendrick Bourne and Demario Douglas underneath, 2 for 2. Cool. Incomplete deep ball to Kayshon Boutte, which was like, let me take my trick shots while I have. This was double coverage. Jalen Hawkins knocks it away. Here come the picks. There was the one, Taylor, you just mentioned, right into Del Pettis' breadbasket. He's looking for C.J. Dupree, the undrafted rookie tight end. It's a deep cross, way overshot him, just not there. A little bit of pressure from Robert Spillane, but whatever. Miscommunication. This was with Pop or with Kyle Williams, right to Christian Gonzalez, who's got his eyes on the quarterback, makes a pick. Next period, screen pass, shallow cross to Hunter Henry. Another pick to Gonzalez, which was a little bit low, and I think Keon White probably would have had a sack on this play. Same area, about the left flat. We're about halfway through now. Another pick. This one deflected by Alex Austin underneath within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage. Finds Craig Woodson. Marcus Jones probably gets there in a slot blitz. Hits Austin Hooper on an out. Shallow cross to Demario Douglas. Incomplete deep to Demario Douglas versus Christian Gonzalez. Screen, check down, both to TreVeyon Henderson. Finishes strong. He was, I think, 7 of 8 or 6 of 8 towards the end. He had Hunter Henry on a deep over. Then a blaze out, which I know Taylor had you excited in rookie minicamp, and here it was again to Kyle Williams. And then a go ball to Javon Baker, who made his own popcorn with a big catch over Christian Gonzalez on a route adjustment. What I liked is only 3 of those 11 completions were screens or checkdowns. This was a guy who didn't get into trouble and need to chow down on checkdowns to find some sort of comfort food. He kept firing. Now, it is interesting, and Mike, you alluded to this. We only go to 3 of what are about 10 OTA practices. If we had showed up Monday, and let's say Monday, which we don't know really what happened, was a great passing day, maybe this is 17-0. Like, those are the headlines. But instead, we showed up on Tuesday. And so the headlines are said, oh, my God, Drake Maye throws 4 picks. Now, that being said, I think the context of not only just everything I just said, but the fact he is a second-year quarterback, still testing his limits of what he can get away with in May and a new offense is important. But the caution is the value of these mistakes lies in the lesson that he can apply moving forward. If they repeat the mistakes, if they become error repeaters, Mike, that to me will say whether this is trouble or not. Right now, Wednesday, May 21st, no pads, all the qualifiers, blah, blah, blah. We don't know yet. We know what happened, but we don't know the meaning of it yet because we don't know what Drake Maye is going to do next to correct it.
Well, that's the other thing, too, where you said, what do you do? What do you do with it, right? And even within practice yesterday, he improved down the stretch. And he got better after a couple early bad throws. And like we said, the headline is 4 interceptions. And as you just went through it, they're not all created equal, where 2 of them, frankly, like I'm okay with him taking a deep shot and him getting undercut by Christian Gonzalez. Like, you don't want that to happen every time. But as you mentioned, you're testing your limits. Same with the deflection. Like, sometimes that shit happens. And Taylor, that's more so an interception than a turnover-worthy play. The one to Pettis and its breadbasket, like those are the ones we kind of want to get rid of. But like, at the end of the day, I'll say it again, it's May 20th. But Andrew, you just said we only see 3 out of these 10 practices. And Taylor, you had said what's going to happen? What happened yesterday? What's going to happen tomorrow? When we're back there on next Wednesday and say he throws 4 picks again, that matters. That's when it starts to get a little bit more like, okay, maybe this is a recurring thing. It's not just the 1 out of 10 practices, 1 out of 10 bad practices that he had. So again, at the end of the day, like you got to take note of it because the interceptions did happen, but they're not all created equal. And, we'll see what he ultimately does with it, not only on next Wednesday, but the rest of the offseason as well.
And I'll go to what you said, Mike, earlier about like the aggressiveness. I really love that. We already knew that was part of Drake Maye's game, but I think when people think of Josh McDaniels, they think of the dink and dunk. They think of all the like death by a million paper cuts. If you look at his offense in Las Vegas, that's not what he was doing. Anytime you give Josh guys who can actually win deep, like he'll go deep. We saw it in the 2017 Patriots, obviously 2007, but like he is more than willing. And I think wants to be that explosive offense that can do a little bit of everything. And like Drake opened the competitive periods, like you mentioned, the deep ball to Kayshon Boutte. His deep throws were pretty much on the money, but it was the typical Boutte situation where he's not the biggest guy, not the fastest. So he's not going to pull away and he's really not going to go up and get it. So the ball was pretty accurate, but it was in a tough situation and he didn't come down with it. And then the throw to Williams against cover 2. There were a couple of times where during the really good period, pre-snap, there were places I wasn't sure he was going to go. Like if they go out and cover 2. They didn't disguise it pre-snap, so Drake knew there's going to be a vulnerability on the sideline with that honey hole between the corner and the safety. Hits that. And then the one to Javon Baker. Mike, I was standing next to you being like, Gonzo, Javon. All right, so I'm going to look to the other side of the field because clearly he's not going to go there because of everything that we know. But, he said, screw that. I'm going to give him a back shoulder ball and give my guy a chance against an all-pro corner. So the fearlessness and the aggressiveness in this McDaniel scheme where I think he's going to give him more of those opportunities than maybe we said publicly. That's the part of this that's exciting for me. The growing pains will come. As long as they're not consistent, I think it will just give us more reasons to look forward to the combination of a Drake Maye and Josh McDaniels. But the receivers have to help as well.
Yeah, and I want to make one comment on McDaniels, and then we'll put a pin on that because it's a good point about not just the flexibility schematically, but his ability to teach and install those different offenses. Like when AVP was clear, could not run the duck and chuck play action offense that were the bones of everything they did in Cleveland, and needed to adjust and kind of invent some sort of short game and lean into that. He couldn't do it last year. And Josh has done this, as you've mentioned, with different iterations of his offense, and they'll find the pieces. This can all be true as we pivot from Drake. Actually, give me your favorite throw, each of you, after this. It was a bad practice for him. I don't care. And those are both true. Like that's just what it is right now. But your favorite throw is the stuff that made you go, okay, there it is. If there's going to be a highlight here that they put on social and splatter everywhere if you work for Patriots.com, what would that throw have been?
Taylor, we probably have the same one, but I love the back shoulder throw to Javon Baker on Christian Gonzalez. Not only for him to test a cornerback of that caliber with a wide receiver who he doesn't maybe necessarily have as much trust in as somebody else on the team, and to give him that shot, for Baker to come down with it. I thought the entire play was pretty impressive, so I'll go with that one.
I'll go with, again, the one to Kyle Williams, just because it perfectly exemplifies, along with the Javon Baker, if you don't disguise what you're doing pre-snap, and I think the disguise is where Drake still has some area to improve, like on the interception to pop, but if he knows what you're doing, he is going to go for the option that gives him the best chance at getting a chunk play, especially, in this setting. So that's the one I like, because I didn't really think he was going to go for the honey hole. I thought it was going to be another stick route to Hunter Henry, the way that he starts every single drive. But that kind of thing, it's just a reminder of, even when he plays poorly early on, he doesn't get rattled, and it doesn't discourage him from taking chances like we saw with Mac Jones. We're like, dude, I went back to 2021, and we all think that he just got the yips in 2022. Or like 2023, man, like there's so many times where you see like a little anticipation and it's a chunk, and he doesn't pull the trigger. And every time I'm like, man, Drake and Josh, TM, like this is gonna be really fun to watch.
God bless you for going back to the end of Mac at that end of street. Like,
I didn't realize what I was getting myself into.
Yeah. Just a lot there. All right, we'll leave that in 2021. You mentioned Kyle Williams in that throw, one of his last ones. It was up there for my favorites. He caught 1 of 4 targets. 2 of the others resulted in the pick that we mentioned, in a pass breakup. He got the ball in some other different ways. The thing, though, that stood out to me, and this isn't meaningful yet because it matters what they do with the snaps, but we got a ton of run for Kyle Williams and TreVeyon Henderson and Craig Woodson. Oh, and Will Campbell, who has not been brought up into a podcast as a number 4 overall pick until we're 21 minutes in. So what did you like and not like? Let's just stay with the top 3 offensive guys. Jared Wilson, again, was limited. Really didn't do anything. Let's start with Will Campbell. As much as you guys did or did not watch him, you didn't see a whole lot. I only watched him a little bit, so I have only one thing on him. Mike?
Yeah, not much. Like you said, frankly, in a passing camp, when they're not doing much, it's kind of hard to glean a ton from the offensive line. So not much to not like from it. The one thing I liked, and not that it's any surprise, but he's often running as their starting left tackle. Like, they're not messing around. They did not put Demontre Jacobs in there with the first team for 2 reps and then put Will Campbell in. You got to earn your keep. Like, no, you're the number 4 overall pick. We think you're a left tackle. We don't care about your itty bitty arms. You're going to be out there, and you're going to be our left tackle. So I thought that was promising. And yeah, he's the guy. And I also liked from him his want to learn from Morgan Moses. Like, every single time there was an off period, he was in his hip pocket talking to him. And at this point, honestly, we may be making something out of nothing, because I feel like that's been brought up ad nauseum on the social media, in the social media world now.
It's catnip for Pat's Twitter, but you know what? Fine. Right. Just call it what it is. Yeah.
But I did think it was good, and not just the technique at the end of practice, but just as soon, like, field goal unit goes on, and he immediately goes over to him, talking to him, whether it's technique, whether it's leadership, whether it's, hey, what are you doing after practice? Like, I think that's a cool relationship to see start to kind of bud.
I mean, yeah, I was going to go with the Morgan Moses angle as well, because that's what you want to see from your first round pick. Like, Drake Maye was always in Jacoby Brissett's ear, and they were always talking in practice last year. And that does, I think, helps. It doesn't set the standard in terms of like everyone's going to do it, but it does at least set the standard of this guy who is the top pick is not afraid to go to a veteran and try to get better. And not just, after practice. I don't know. Obviously, like with the quarterbacks, they're always so tight. But for a player outside of that room, I don't know if last year we really saw that, where it was a young guy who was consistently asking a veteran about things. So I thought, that angle of it, we could put too much stock into, because we don't have a whole lot else to talk about. But I do like that there's that humility from the rookie to try to learn from a Morgan Moses, who did the same thing with Trent Williams. Like, he talked about how when he was in Washington as a rookie, he had a future Hall of Famer, and he was picking his brain. So it's cool to be able to see that with a player that you're hoping becomes a franchise builder.
Yeah, now that I think about it, I mean, the obvious example last year among rookies seeking out mentorship was Drake Maye, right? I mean, he was with Jacoby Brissett in the way that, anytime that you saw quarterbacks early in Brady's career, just they were in the shadow, right, of number 12. They were right there watching, learning, taking notes, et cetera, et cetera. And look, that doesn't mean success now for Will Campbell, because he's just a puppy dog around Morgan Moses, but that doesn't hurt. The one thing I did like about him, because like you guys, it's, for people who go to practice or a training camp and watch as fans, they know this. Like, you get one play. There's no video board replaying what happens. I might ask you guys, did you see this the same way? You might ask me. Like, there's some collaboration here, because you get one shot to watch all these plays. When we say we didn't watch the offensive line, it's not because I was just off sipping, a Sunkist and just like doing something else other than watching practice. It's just you didn't watch it. But the 2 plays that stood out, because the ball went literally behind him, were 2 screens left to TreVeyon Henderson. And the way that he explodes out of his stance and gets downfield really popped in a way that you popped at the combine, right? Top 5 in all these metrics among offensive linemen. I think that screen game, which also involves Henderson, either of you can take him next, of what you saw, is not a weapon yet, but you can see that they're not going to ignore that part of his skill set. And I like that. If you got an athletic left tackle who can get in space and is mean and physical, like throw behind him, get him on the move. And they're already doing that multiple times in one practice.
That's one reason why when we talk about Will Campbell, like I understand the shorthand is to reference his short arms. And yes, that's going to be an issue when he goes up against elite edge rushers in obvious pass situations. That is such a small fraction of what's going to happen in a game. I feel like we don't talk about the screens where some linemen look like a deer in headlights. Like they go out on a screen and they look like they have no idea what they're doing, and they're not really very intimidating. Will Campbell wasn't out in space a ton at LSU, but when he was, like it was scary to look at. Like he's clearly trying to find the closest guy and put him like 6 feet in the ground. So there's the screens, there's the pulling, on toss plays where TreVeyon Henderson, once you get him into space and he got against like safeties and corners, he's just throwing the stiff arm and then taking it, to the house. So I like that element as well. And then the combination of Henderson and Will Campbell, those explosive athletes. I mean, the outside zone stuff, like so many elements of the offense that we haven't seen because you had the Vidarian Lowe's and, Trent Brown when he wanted to participate. There's been so much inconsistency at that spot. I feel like we forget that left tackle can be a difference maker as more than just a pass protector. And that's something I think is going to benefit everybody around him in a lot of different ways.
And for context on the Will Campbell short arms thing, for those who watch pass interference on Press Pass, but don't check out Patriots Daily, I only mention short arms because every time I do it, I just get to see Taylor roll his eyes and shake his head. So that's half the battle here with that. But the segue into, our next guy, and we're talking about TreVeyon Henderson, so we can talk about it.
Let me push back a second. Because
sure.
It is true that pass protection is not the only color on the palette, okay? But when I need a big play or a moment, like all the high leverage situations, Will Campbell is going to be dropping back into a pass set. So it is more important than I think any other skill right now, even for a run first team, because you're in tight games. If you're coming back, you're going to have to throw. But
Trey Henderson chips, baby. I'm just saying, Trey Henderson chip blocks.
Well, and this is a great transition by you, but I'm just going to have to pull back again and negate the transition. Is that in doing some reporting for the Will Campbell piece I posted last week, what Vrabel wanted at the very end was, okay, what's your plan B? Like when they line up against the Raiders week 1, Max Crosby has an awesome long arm rush. A lot of people are going to rush Will Campbell with the long arms because he doesn't have either one on his left or right side. What's your recovery like? What are you going to do? What my whole mission is just to expose your physical deficiencies, because that's what it is for that position. They're more than happy, more than believing his plan B and C to negate some of those rushes and the elite edge rushers who give everybody problems, even if you have the longest arms in the NFL. So that's why it is a thing. But they believe he can compensate other ways and will be able to in those high leverage moments. And then is more than additive in run blocking and in screen games and a lot of different stuff they want to do, pulling on the tosses or pin and pull, whatever they're going to do. So just to put a pin in Will Campbell. But yeah, Henderson was explosive. Mike, what'd you like most about him?
Yeah, he's so fast. It's just he's fast as hell. He can run, he can move. He looks the part pretty much right away. And I know that also kind of has to do with Ramondre not being there, and he's sort of forced into already taking first team reps behind Antonio Gibson. But the speed really what sticks out, especially running behind Campbell, like you said, on some of those screens. And then I don't know if this was necessarily a negative, because frankly, I didn't see him on this play, but there was one point where he was in pass protection and Tony Deuce kind of started going nuts on him and started to kind of rip a new one a little bit, be like, no, you gotta get in there and go. And I don't know
running
if
coach. Yeah.
Say that again.
Oh, running backs coach. He's new here. Yeah.
Tony Deuce, running backs coach. Got into him a little bit, was like, no, you gotta do X, Y, Z. And again, I don't know if this could have been after the NFLPA guy was down Mike Vrabel's throat saying, get your guys off the ground. And so maybe he was just running through a rep, not going through all the way. But Deuce was kind of on him. And then I watched TreVeyon Henderson the next play, and he was like, I'm not going to let that happen again, and kind of, work through it a better way. So I like his, so far, ability to kind of take some coaching there as well. But, mainly the speed is what sticks out. I feel like he's going to his skill set is something that can, if he knows what he's up to and knows what he's doing, can translate right away.
I'm going to go with the speed. The hands look really easy, as you probably expected. I'll actually kind of use this as an example to talk about the fact that during warmups, we didn't really see this in years past, at least me. Like Mike Vrabel will have them catch passes and sprint to finish, like not run, sprint. And it actually gave us a chance. The reason I really noticed because you can see who's really fast in ways that you don't really get to. Like obviously game speed, like when it's competitive, it's different. But seeing like Kyle Williams running a straight line, seeing TreVeyon Henderson running a straight line and like bust ass, you're like, whoa, okay. Like Henderson's a bulky guy. You look at maybe his numbers, he doesn't seem like he's the biggest dude. But when you look at how he's built and how fast he gets, it's pretty easy to see why he hits so many home runs. Because when you're at that, like I said, at the third, second level, guys are like, I don't really want to tackle you. I'll slow you down maybe, but like this is not what I'm getting paid for. So the smooth hands and then that speed that he and some other players showed, and also just Mike Vrabel seeing what it looks like when he talks about like wanting to finish and strain, like that's what it looks like. Where unlike last year where you catch it and you kind of run, not a jog, but like now it's no, seriously, like run like you're trying to get into the end zone during warmups. I love that part of practice.
I got two things on Henderson. One was the decisiveness in blitz pickup. Like as soon as you saw the ball snapped, he was shooting either up the middle or he was scanning going left, jumping across right. Like that was good. Wasn't always the right decision, but he saw what he saw and he trusted it and he went with his gut. Number two is just the number of snaps. And that, again, is how we started. The rookies got a lot of run, and you expect that for a team that drafted 4th and 38th, and Kyle Williams goes 69th. But just the fact with Ramondre out, they didn't go, oh, we'll give some more to like Land Larison, all due respect, who had a drop. And Henderson did too, but he ate on first and second team. And that's what you would want. I think that's what fans want. I think that's what the coaches will do so long as he shows he can hold up. And at least through 2 practices, he has. Okay, so we still have more than 3 months until Patriots football is back in our lives. Until Drake Maye and Mike Vrabel are on the field at the same time. Raiders, Week 1, Gillette Stadium going nuts September 7th. What are we going to do until then? You can watch basketball playoffs. You can watch hockey playoffs. For me, whether it's basketball, hockey, or even regular season baseball, I will be over at Prizepicks. Longtime supporters of this podcast and still going on years now, the best place to win cash while watching sports anywhere. This is how easy it is. You build a lineup of any player that you want at Prizepicks who comes with a stat. You look at that stat and you can go more than or less than, whether it's runs or hits or points or steals or goals, it doesn't matter. But only at Prizepicks do you build a lineup of 2 to 6 players, take more or less on their stats, and lock it in. You could even do this on a Taco Tuesday. Why do they call it Taco Tuesday? Actually, not for the tacos. It's for the discounts, where you will get a discount, usually by 15 to 25%, or use a Flex Friday, where you can change your lineups and go extra to get extra money, but only at Prizepicks. And if you sign up today, you will get $50 instantly once you sign up with code CLNS. Again, that's downloading the app today using code CLNS for your $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup, only at Prizepicks. Run your game. We talked a lot about Kyle Williams, so I want to move on before we get to the defense. Positionally, the depth chart is fluid. This is the talking point, and yet at the same time, the team has guidelines and says, hey, you cannot report X, Y, and Z guys at different positions and this and that. Don't do starters, don't do backups, and we all kind of find our way around those rules. But all of that is to say they did rotate a ton yesterday on offense. So when you see first team and it's Kayshon Boutte and it's Kendrick Bourne, it's DeMario Douglas, as I break said rules immediately, this isn't to say that that's in Sharpie, right? Because Stephon Diggs is not here. And Afton Chisholm had a great game. And you got Javon Baker and Jalen Polk, and Polk didn't participate. But whether it was receiver or offensive line or hell tight end, wherever it goes, Mike, what was the most notable positional rotation that you saw, even though it might not have told us anything firmly here again in mid-May?
Interior offensive line, I think, was sort of what stuck out to me. And it's funny you mentioned that we're not supposed to really report on this and talk about it. The rotations they went through yesterday makes it nearly impossible for us to bring out a starting offensive line, a starting receiver, because they really were moving through a lot where they had those front five guys, but then once they went into 11, the right side left, and they turned that into I think Schweitzer came over, and so there was a lot of rotation there. I thought Cole Strange originally being among the top players at left guard was interesting. I feel like they're going to at least give him a chance to win that battle. A lack of Layden Robinson sort of in the starting mix was interesting. I figured, with what he was able to do last year, I thought, maybe he could be given more of a chance early on. But again, it's super early. But I do think just where not only was it not frankly, Layden Robinson to start, but then also the ability for them to move Cole Strange left to right, Schweitzer left to right. I thought that was interesting, and that kind of solidified where they're at depth chart wise, more so than what we thought before we saw any practice.
I go with the edge spot opposite Harold Landry, because going in, that was the one spot on defense where, like, safety, you kind of wanted to see how it played out and everything. And obviously Peppers and Duggar being limited, we didn't get a great view. But it feels like Landry, one of the higher paid guys, he's going to be on the field probably as much as they can. But then after him, you've got Jennings, you've got Chason, you got Keon White, you've got the rookies. So I was curious how that rotation was going to look. It seems like Keon White, is still going to be one of those top guys. Hopefully he can finally bring the production he has when he's on the inside to the outside. I think that'd really be huge for this defense. Behind him, it looked like Chason was really the main guy as that kind of edge three. And I kept seeing Anthony Jennings and Truman Jones on the same line. And like, there weren't rotations really. It was like those two together a lot. I kind of had to look up who 54 was, to be honest. It tells you, like, because Truman Jones just isn't someone that factors into the roster. And Braden Swinson and, Elijah Ponder understandably were running together as well. So Jennings is an elite run defender. We know that. But if they use more 4-down fronts, his value takes a pretty significant hit. So as good as he is at what he does, I do wonder if Anthony Jennings is kind of on the outside looking in because he doesn't bring as much pass rush as pretty much everybody else on that depth chart.
So Taylor bringing us to defense. I'm gonna hit pause and then backtrack once again, really quickly though, because again, the fluidity of the depth chart is a thing. I think one thing to keep in mind is that coaches very often, especially this time of year, will default to the veteran, not because they're rooting for him, but because in certain instances, like left guard, where we saw a lot of Wes Schweitzer, who I think people have forgotten, and he's bounced around, played for the Jets and a little bit at Atlanta, I think, in Washington. You just put him in left guard and say, hey, you know what the calls are. It's just a different name. If he doesn't blow up the play, you can find out more about the young guys around him. Because if he does blow up the play, then it's kind of gone immediately. And you might say, hey, Layden Robinson, like, we liked that finish last year, but it's a new system. We're going to go with the veteran for now. And so that to me wasn't a huge surprise. But to Taylor's point about the defense, before we do a stud and dud on offense, then go fully to defense, that was interesting because Anthony Jennings has been around the block. This is a guy midway through his second contract. And they were like, not for us right now. We'll take the lighter guy who's a little bit more explosive and is a passing camp. But look, Anthony Jennings and K'Lavon, like Anthony Jennings has more career sacks than K'Lavon Chason, a guy who was a first-round pick. Okay, so like it is interesting, but I don't want to put a ton of stock into it. I just want to explain that I think when we talk about the rotations, and you're like, why is Wes Schweitzer next to Will Campbell and Garrett Bradbury? Well, he's older. Like there's less conversation between him and Doug Marrone than there probably is Layden Robinson. One stud and one dud really quickly on offense, and then we'll jump in on defense.
I'll start with offense is hard for a stud because it just wasn't a great day. I'll go with Baker because I thought he made a really impressive play. That was sort of the one. There was a couple other, solid plays, but I think that popped as far as, he didn't get a ton of run, but when he was out there, he made an impact play against Christian Gonzalez. And then the dud for me, unfortunately, it's Jalen Polk, and I think it's injury related, and he wasn't he wasn't really involved, so that's kind of unfortunate. But I think these are the times in the offseason where you kind of have to make impressions. And for him to not be able to be involved and kind of have to work out on the side and rehab and really not be around the rest of the room, it puts him in a tough situation and behind the eight ball this early, and it's unfortunate. But I just think that, him not being able to be a part of the first and second team rotation could potentially hurt him in the long run.
With duds, I'd probably go with Kayshon Boutte, and we're dealing with like such a small sample size. I cannot stress that enough. Like I know people saw the one hand stab and like, oh, and Boutte does that a lot. Like you'll see like every practice he has one or two catches. We're like, damn, right, he is very good. But like the post just kind of gave me a little PTSD of like that's the part of his game where every year, like since LSU, people talk about how much talent he has, but there's always the but he doesn't finish routes and he's not always the most consistent. And that's really been the thing with Boutte. So I was disappointed. I would probably say that wasn't the best.
Do you have a stud?
Stud, I'll go again. Tough, maybe Efton Chisholm, just because he got a lot of run, and just watching him, like it's everything that I was hoping to see. It's the no wasted movement in his routes. It's like literally he runs his routes like his life depends on it, and the suction cups for hands. It's just like it hits his gloves, and there's no bobble. It stops. I really like that, and the fact that he isn't just a slot, which is where I thought his role might have been. And I think some of that is because there's no Matt Collins. Obviously, there's no Diggs. Like, there's not a lot of and no Jalen Pope. So not a ton of guys to take those reps from him. But we also saw in rookie minicamp him lining up there. So the fact that he's not just a slot and he's getting some opportunities at Z where I think he can be really effective as a blocker, I think for someone who's an undrafted rookie, that was pretty good to see.
I want to co-sign on Chisholm, 4 or 5 catches, tied for the most targets in team drills. He had the most catches, and he won short and intermediate. So one practice, good for him. Booty 0 for 1 in his targets in team drill. So it was that single post, and then it was, okay, goodbye. You can go kind of take a hike. Dud for me was Lance Larison, and he's another undrafted rookie. He dropped the pass, caught another one. Cool, but did not pop in the way that I might expected for a guy given all the highlights and everything. This does not mean anything, does not affect what I think his chances are of making the roster. For one practice, non-padded, his second ever as a professional football player, just not great. All right, defensively, I would like to bubble wrap Christian Gonzalez. I would like to put him on the shelf. I would like to feed him and have him go for long walks and then just show up on September 7th and play football against the Raiders. Who says no?
Well, it's funny. We had these conversations last year, but it was when he wasn't having a great camp because it was like, don't worry about it. It doesn't matter. He's going to be fine. He's testing the waters, blah, blah, blah. Just let him go out there on Sunday. And obviously we saw that ascension into a second team All-Pro.
I will say I was worried. I at the end was like, I don't know.
And to be fair, Coach Flight said he was worried too. He had to ask Gonzo, like, what's going on here? And then he was like, oh, Pellegrino's got me doing some stuff. So it wasn't just, I should have probably been more alarmed than I was.
And so for him, though, to take that ascension last year from not a great camp into a de facto superstar, and now he's playing, again, it's one practice. Just like we can't hype up too much the 4 May interceptions, we can't hype up the Christian Gonzalez 2 picks either. But, like, he played pretty well. He's sticky. He's solid. He looks bigger. He looks, he's into Pilates now, as he mentioned yesterday. I thought that was pretty funny. But, no, I just think that if he can play as well as he did yesterday and then take a same ascension track like he did last year when he wasn't great, this is going to be one of the best cornerbacks in football next year, no questions asked. Bubble wrap him. I agree.
And the Pilates. I mean, he's taking care of his body. Because I was kind of curious. Like, he's with a player like Christian Gonzalez, where you're just like, there's not a whole lot from a naked eye that he can do to get better. Kind of cool to see, trying something a little different. He said it was working out body parts, muscles he didn't know he had. So that's pretty cool.
He was also like, this shit's hard, which I don't know.
Yeah.
23, 24, whatever age he is. Guys like that in their physical prime who know they're the best at what they do on the whole freaking planet, admitting anything physically or athletically is difficult. He's like, man, I don't want any more of that smoke.
When I asked him, I remember with Tyreek Hill when he played him, I was like, dude, you're like 6'2", like running with Tyreek Hill. That's crazy. He's just like, yeah. He's usually indifferent when you talk about him being a freak athlete. And that was the one time he's like, damn, man, they kind of got me.
Yeah. Mike, I'm glad you mentioned last summer because my default line is he was giving up catches, and that's not any kind of crime, especially in training camp. In spring practices are so you F up, and then you can fix it later, which is why, again, we're all underselling. Oh, my God, Drake Maye had 4 interceptions. But by the end of camp, I was like, can I just get a little bit of the guy that I think will be a number 1 corner, and for 4 games as a rookie in 2023 showed that is exactly what he was capable of? I said, can I just see a 5th game before I declare he's an all-pro or not? Sure. He said no, and then proceeded to be a second-team all-pro. And so I don't think this is indicative of anything, but this feels like a pitcher who knows he's got great stuff, and he wants to tinker with a knuckle curve, and it's not landing, and it's outside the zone. And then he's like, all right, well, I'm just going to go to my base stuff, and it's great, and he's going to be fine anyway. So we know that about Christian Gonzalez. What we don't know, though, is exactly how this new defense, which I want to say was Milton Williams, who we talked to a couple weeks ago. Like, okay, what's different about this defense from what you saw in Philly? And his answer surprised me because he said, like, not a lot. This is kind of similar to the Vic Fangio scheme that he used. And that's not entirely true with the overlap. But what did you, Start Taylor, notice big picture about this Mike Vrabel defense that will have a little bit of overlap with the Belichick system we saw for literally 25 seasons consecutively, okay? As the game evolved, it evolved too. But this is a new scheme. This is a new system. What did you notice that was most different? And I think fans will see whether they come to training camp or in the season starting in September.
grain of salt because, it's kind of tough to notice on a down-to-down basis, but they are using a lot of those four-man fronts like we thought they were going to. Belichick more rooted in those five-down kind of odd fronts. I still personally think with all the depth they have on the defensive line, that might be the best version of this front. But we saw a lot of Milton Williams and Christian Barmore as the only guys inside and then kind of different edge casts around them. So that's the really biggest difference is they're going to be like the Fangio scheme. It's not as much just reading gaps. You're trying to attack and be aggressive, and there's a little bit more of a mix. So it did definitely seem like the aggressive looks that we were expecting kind of translated yesterday.
Yeah, I'll second the front aspects of it. But I just think, and I mentioned a little bit earlier too, it was like the absence of an overarching head coach was kind of intriguing to me, where even without Terrell Williams out with his illness, and the fact that he just kind of trusted his assistants and Zach Kerr leading the charge to take it and let it go and essentially not worry. And so I think that has a lot to do with his coaching and leadership style and the guys that he's brought in. But I know Belichick leaned into the offense a little bit more at the end of his tenure here because he kind of had to. Because
yes,
exactly. And there was no one to run it, and everyone who did run it was essentially just Matt Patricia and all of his Bobos. And so, but on that front, with like even Mayo was a defensive guy, kind of, but he tried to be we don't have to rehash Mayo. Long story short, absence of a head coach presence, but a young staff that kind of just knew what they were doing, was able to run it even without Terrell Williams. I thought that was interesting to see on the defensive side of the ball, and things ran pretty smooth on that kind of front as well.
I'm going to echo a lot of points. The four down front stuff was there. You saw, again, a more attacking, kind of penetrating style with that said defensive front. There's also a swarm mentality, which a lot of coaches love to talk about. Go to the football, find the football. Dudes are trying to punch the ball out 30, 40 yards downfield. And this is a camp thing, and maybe it fades come week 6 or 7. I don't think it will, because that's how Mike Vrabel played, and that's all that we've heard from him, not just this year, but his years in Tennessee. Like, this is going to be a defense that is going to win sometimes because they are just going to be more persistent than you, more relentless than you. It's not going to, take points off of the board or shut everybody out, but there is a sense of attacking is not just mean playing one gap. It means we're getting after your ass until the refs pull us off of the pile or tell us to stop. The one other thing I'll say, too, because this reminded me, even going back to 18, Vrabel's first year, Patriots go down there right before the bye, get their asses kicked, is that game and have since, a lot of creative four-man rushes. Like I mentioned in the rundown of Drake Maye's passes, Marcus Jones got in unblocked on a slot blitz. You'll have, because of those only 2 defensive tackles, Barmore and Milton Williams that Taylor talked about, everyone else is free to either drop or come, and they're going to mix and match there, which you see sometimes in, designer stuff on third down. The sim pressures, a lot of creepers there, I think are going to be more prevalent even than recent years, but I think the Patriots would wait to get in their bag on third down to get to that stuff. They're excellent at it, but Vrabel's like, no, we're coming now. And I think we saw a little bit of that at practice. All right, positionally, Taylor, you told us about Keon White and the edges and the rotation and Caleb on Chase on in there. Do you have a second choice of the position you looked at? And Peppers didn't play, and Duggars didn't play in the 11-on-11. So, but go somewhere else that you were like, oh, that's a little surprising.
Yeah, I kind of went a little early on that one. But the linebacker spot, I'd say opposite Robert Spillane, because you didn't know who was going to start, right? You have the Vrabel guys, you have a returning former starter in Jelani Tavai, and it looked like early on Jelani Tavai was the guy next to Robert Spillane, which again, this is a Vrabel defense. You don't usually go with like the 250-pound middle linebacker, but Jelani Tavai was right in his usual spot, but there also seemed to be a rotation. Like Spillane was working with pretty much everyone. And yes, the roster's fluid, but it felt like there were some positions where like some guys aren't going to leave the field very often. Second level, that was Spillane, but it doesn't seem like that spot next to him is necessarily secure right now, so that's going to be a fun battle to watch.
I'll say cornerback opposite Christian Gonzalez. And I know Carlton Davis is sort of going to be that guy, but they used Marcus Jones on the boundary a little bit more than I expected as well, where it wasn't just he's your slot guy or they weren't working another slot guy. Because like Taylor, we talked about the types of slot cornerbacks Mike Vrabel, likes to use. It wasn't somebody in the build of a Marcus Jones. So we wondered early on when they first hired Vrabel into the offseason what his standing on the team would be. Now we kind of know that he is right there in that top rotation, outside, inside, obviously as a punt returner as well. So I just think that where and how they used Marcus Jones early on is promising for certainly his tenure in New England.
I like it. I co-signed on Taylor's pick of the inside linebacker spot. Mostly it was like, oh, Jelani's he's back. He's there for another period. You're going to start next to Robert Spillane, who everyone should become familiar with because he's signed to be the starter, to be a captain, if not officially eventually, but unofficially. And then Christian Ellis got in there, and he's paid, starter-ish money, but I don't know if he's worth that contract just yet. So we'll see how that rotation goes, but it's something that I'm keeping an eye on because the safety is like, it was cool to see Jalen Hawkins and Del Pettis and Craig Woodson. Those two plus Kyle Duggar and Jabril Peppers might be the entire safety depth chart. I don't know, but I want to see what that group looks like when they're competing against guys that should have the starting jobs. And Peppers and Duggar just weren't out there. All right, one stud and one dud on defense. I'm going to lead this off. Christian Barmore, man, is my stud, and this is far and away anybody else at practice. The man was on the football field from start to finish. Less than 6 months after blood clots came back in December, sidelined him, and I asked him what it felt like, and he was just talking about like mental anguish. Forget the physical stuff. We talked to him last week. Super happy for him. And this has nothing to do with football. It's just a young man who's talented at what he does, being able to do it. And it's May, and there are no pads, and blah, blah, blah. And he's got a long way to go. But right now, this is huge. Hat tip to Christian Barmore. Dud for me. Since we're not doing special teams, I'm just going to take the easy, low-hanging fruit. John Parker Romo was 2 of 4. This is a kicking competition. It seems like nominally, I don't think he's going to get it. And that's my dud of practice. Taylor?
For stud, can I go with Christian Gonzalez? Like, is that even fair?
Yeah.
We got to acknowledge him because the plays he made, it wasn't just being opportunistic, which like is important for a corner. Some guys, you could hand them the ball and they'll drop it. The fact that he's not only able to take advantage when it's there, but also go out of his coverage assignment and make one, that's kind of stuff you want to see from Gonzo. Dud, just because there weren't a lot of guys that necessarily stood out in a bad way, I'll go with Jennings just because he seems like he's lower on the depth chart. And again, I'm trying to take these rotations with a grain of salt. Maybe the next time we're at practice, we do see Jennings, kind of rotating more in. But the fact that he was only working with someone who has almost no chance of making the roster, I did think was pretty alarming.
Well, my stud was Gonzo as well. Also, shout out to Christian Barmore as well. I think that's ultimately the right pick. But I'll throw Del Pettis into the mix as well. I mean, taking his opportunities for what they were with Peppers and Duggar limited and Marte Mapu limited as well in that rotation, which we'll get to in my dud. Pettis was right there and used that opportunity, had the nice interception. And just like last year was kind of always when he got his chance, played pretty good football. And I thought yesterday was the same for him. And then it's kind of like the cop out with the offense where it's just because he was limited, but Marte Mapu, man, once again, not out there, not available. It's too bad. And I guess I do feel for him because you want to see a guy like that succeed. Someone who was taken with a top 100 pick and had so much, or is not the right word, but kind of expectations around him. He can play everywhere on the back end of the defense, yada, yada, yada. We just haven't seen it like we wanted to. So, yeah, I'd say Mapu was a dud just because he wasn't able to get out there either.
All due respect to Marte and you, Mike, but if that man has aura so far in his 2-year NFL career, so do I, waking up at 3:23 in the morning to go pee in the middle of the night. This is just, we can't, like, if he's got aura, everyone else in the league.
Expectation was the better word than aura.
He
was very popular in that red jersey.
He had a lot of injury history. It sucks. He was a Bill pick. Belichick fell in love with him on tape alone, even before the combine. And he came to New England, lo and behold. And sometimes those work out and other times they don't. And I hope the best for Marte, but we'll hit pause on that. All right, final thoughts. Mike, anything we missed, anything that stood out, or something you're looking for next Wednesday, which is the next time the media will go to an OTA practice?
Yeah, just looking at my chicken scratch notebook here. Mike Vrabel's presence, I mentioned a little bit, but even when they were doing the in warm-ups, when they were doing routes on air, trying to get through the end zone, like he was chasing down Pop Douglas at full speed, trying to essentially look to tackle him. Like he is everywhere, all across the field, and that's Mike Vrabel, not Demario Douglas, kind of taking control. And it feels like there is a lot more. I don't want to keep bagging on Gerard. Professionalism around practice. Not that we were able to see it necessarily last year as much as what we've heard, but Vrabel has control, and I think that's promising in the end. Looking forward to next time. Drake Maye improvement, not throwing 4 interceptions. We'll see if this becomes an anomaly and not a tradition.
Yeah, I'd say the biggest thing is I just want to see the offense kind of fight back and be more competitive, a little bit more consistent. if they go out and he throws 2 more interceptions, it's not like it's the end of the world, but still you do, and growth is not linear, but you do want to see some improvement. Then the other thing, I'm going through my notes as well, that kind of stood out. One, I like that the way that Mike Vrabel handled the question about Ramondre Stevenson, because I feel like the discourse around him has gone a little too far. Like, yes, the ball security needs to get fixed, and whether it's his play style, whether it's his grip strength, whatever, like that can't continue. But Mike Vrabel made it very clear that Ramondre is someone who does have a future on this team and is going to be a very important member of it. Some people kind of figure that TreVeyon Henderson was going to like push Ramondre maybe off the roster. Never thought that was realistic, but it was just nice for him to kind of plainly state and also obviously show support. And it was just yet another example of Mike Vrabel following through on what he said and wanting to be a coach who is someone that players can rely on, and he wants to be there for you, and saying that he's been, checking in on Ramondre. That was just, another positive of that.
Yeah, it's a good shout, Taylor. And I'm trying to find the exact quote as I look for the transcript here that we had from Vrabel, because he did say he's going to be okay. I'll just read it here now. This is Mike Vrabel yesterday before practice about Ramondre Stevenson. Quote, "We're extremely excited to have him with us. I've been in constant communication with him. Obviously, our thoughts and prayers are with him and his family. I want to be a part of that to help him and get to know him. I met him early on, and then he went back. So he's from Las Vegas. I assume that's where Ramondre is now. He was not at practice, and it seems like, he will be back at some point." The end of the quote is Vrabel went on and on and on. "He's going to be a large part of what we do, and we'll just have to determine where he's at when he's back here." So they don't seem to be rushing him. I know they've given him plenty of space. And look, you have a sudden loss like that, it's going to be a big deal. One last thing, because I want pushback to the pushback. If you have anything, Taylor, on 13-4, when I jokingly used the Stephen A. Smith, very famous "stay off the weed" gif, which was not in any way literal, but just to say, I can't believe my man tweeted this. And I love the optimism, and you guys are on the show, and I respect your football opinions and thoughts. It still blew my mind. Tell me why I'm wrong, or make the case, or take this and do whatever the hell you want with it.
My whole thing was I saw 13 winnable games, or games that on the schedule I figured they probably should win. Now, Vegas gave them 11. My additional 2 were at Miami, just because in a Vrabel-Mike McDaniel matchup, I just cannot, I don't feel good about choosing Mike McDaniel in that. And earlier game in Miami, if they're going to beat them, it's probably going to be in September. And then they're playing the Bills, coming off a game where they're going to be facing the Bengals and the Patriots are off a bye. So you could definitely say those were optimistic. I think they really win more like 11 games. I think that's what's going to happen. I'm going to predict 12, though, because I really do think that the coaching staff that they have acquired, where it's not just guys that are names, they have experienced guys. Now, there's some spots like wide receiver, you're going to have to see how that goes, because you have a coach there that's not particularly experienced in that area. But Terrell Williams on the defensive line, Mike Vrabel increasing the attention to detail and competitiveness and toughness of the entire roster, and then the combination of Josh McDaniels and Drake Maye, I'm very confident in. And then the offensive line as well probably seems like the biggest reason this team wouldn't reach double-digit wins. But considering they finally have an entire second line really of developmental depth, and Doug Marrone, who feels like he's kind of grown as a coach since maybe his last stop in the league, and the offensive assistants they have at that position, plus McDaniels and Vrabel, it just feels like there's a lot more insulation in terms of coaching. And talent has been an issue for this team, as we all know, but I also think a lot of it has been you can't get anything out of the players you have for the most part because the coaching isn't there. So, yes, I know I don't think they're going to win 13 games, and I know that even 12 is sunny. But I think less than double digits would absolutely be a disappointment, considering you got the quarterback, the coach, and you've got the offensive coordinator, and there's no glaring weak spots or glaring holes on the roster, really just spots where you want to see how they shake out. And maybe I feel differently, by the time we get to or after the preseason, but I really do have a lot of faith in this roster because of the coaching, because of the depth that they've acquired and talent, and also Drake Maye.
And not that it's my job to stick up for Taylor. I'm supposed to be the one that kind of pushes back on him. A Twitter screen grab that I tweet out speaks a lot more than listening to our hour schedule release podcast, right?
Absolutely.
Obviously. And so as we're going through them, you did say these 13 games, I think they should win. It comes out to 13-4. That's different than saying they're going to go 13-4. And because when I was going through and I had 10-7, which thankfully I didn't get nearly as much pushback as Taylor did for 3 more wins, but like games are won and lost all the time that you're not supposed to win, you're not supposed to lose, right? Like I had them losing to Cleveland. Taylor was like, why the hell are they going to lose to Cleveland? And I kind of was just like, I don't know, Flacco can get hot sometimes and win a football game. So like those games are going to happen along the way, which could bring 13 wins to 10 wins, etc. So people got to relax. It was obviously optimistic, but I do think when you go through the 13 games, they could win all of those games. Will they? We'll obviously have to wait and see.
No, I love you standing up for a teammate. And look, you guys are on here because, like I said, I respect your opinions. I want to go through practice. You have stuff that I wasn't in my notes. And Twitter is never a place for self-esteem or sensitivity. But when it became what it did, I was like, okay, this is not fair. We're going to take the time of the pod, give Taylor a shot to say what he wants. I'm on the 9-8 spot right now, which is still over, with all the over-under totals and whatever they mean. Like, this is just stuff we have to subsist on until the football really gets here in July. At which point, you guys will be back. Listen, watch the Patriots Daily, read Mike at Sports Illustrated, Taylor, everything at CLNS Media. I think we covered it all. You guys have to go. Thank you for the time. And we don't have a friendly wager yet, but maybe we will. Maybe we will on somewhere here in the double digits. All right?
Let's do it.
Appreciate you guys.
Thanks, Andrew. Appreciate you.